Start. I think everybody's in a pretty good mood today. We've had a fantastic melt. We're really seeing good things out there, and we're able to come around with some things aren't as bad as we thought, and we may be revising some things as well today. But we're really pleased with what's going on out there in the country. So again, just like we did before, we'll just go around the table to introduce who's at the table today, and we'll start off the meeting then.
I'm Bruce Grubb, Fargo City Administrator.
I'm Michael Redlinger, Assistant City Administrator, Fargo.
Brenda Derrig, City Engineer, Fargo.
Nathan Borboom, City of Fargo Engineering.
Nicole Crutchfield, Director of Planning.
Ben Dow, Public Works.
Terry Ludlam, Sandbag Central.
Steve Dirksen, Fire Chief.
Dave Todd, Police Chief. I almost said Fire Chief. It's a demotion.
Missy Eisness, Fargo Public Schools.
Heather Lease, West Fargo Public Schools.
Mark Nesbitt, representing the Chamber of Commerce.
Dean Brashani, NDSU.
Joel Vettel, Fargo Parks.
Darren Anderson, Wing Commander, North Dakota Air Guard.
Benson, Cass County Engineer.
Robert Wilson, Cass County Administrator.
Jesse Johnner, Cass County Sheriff.
Bernie Dardis, City of West Fargo.
John Strand, Fargo City Commission.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo. First of all, I want to thank all the volunteers that showed up last week. We had the schools there. We had a lot of volunteers as far as the business community as well, and we had a great Sandbag Central experience. We got sandbags we needed, and we're very pleased about that. Especially fun to watch the middle schoolers trying to figure out the bags and the speed and what goes on and be able to visit at the same time. Bruce, you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first off, what a difference a week makes. At our first flood meeting a week ago, Greg Gus from the National Weather Service gave us a presentation on their probabilistic forecast that came out on March 15th. And it had some noticeable numbers in it. Having been around this for 30 years, I noticed those numbers. For example, the 50% probability of a 38-foot crest on the Red River. That gets our attention around here because of our experience. And then Thursday of last week, the weekly snowmelt report came out, and in that report, it talked about maybe less of a threat than we thought, earlier predictions. And so that caused us to pause and put into practice what we said we would do on Monday. It's easier to ramp down than ramp up, and so we thought, based on updated information, it seemed appropriate to ramp down. And Sandbag Central had operated for 4 days. Based on that updated information, we didn't see a need to continue Sandbag Central this week. However, and Terry Ludlam will talk about that in a little bit, we've got all the equipment and materials standing at the ready, and so I think we're in a very good place. But at this point, I would like to ask Greg Gus with the National Weather Service again to update us on what they're seeing today, what their models are telling them, and really looking forward to good news, Greg.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Mayor Mahoney, Mayor Dardis, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, good news. So I'm on our web page, and let's see if I can operate this from here. So you will see that there is green showing up with flood warnings in and around the area. And I'm just going to click on up here at our flood briefing page, and a couple of things to notice. Just off of this hydrologic discussion at the bottom here. So we are talking about that snow melt and runoff cycle has been exquisite for the last 2 weeks, going into our 3rd week now. With that, we actually see the water virtually dribbling off the landscape. And it's still a lot of water that is parked in areas on the landscape, but it's coming into the far southern basin, and it's opening things up. If you drive around and look at those rivers, you'll notice that, just halfway up the red from Wahpeton, we still have ice all over that river. We still have ice on the Wild Rice. We still have ice on most of the tributaries. And so that is not yet opened up, but a fair chunk of what is going to come off from the South Basin, and that's coming in off the Boitazoo, off the Otter Tail, off the tributaries that come into there, has come off. And so we're currently at Wapaton, cresting with what probably is going to be the biggest crest of their cycle coming through there. There's still some snow melt, still some water to come off, still a little bit of flow in the system. But down at Lake Traverse over at Orwell Dam on the Otter Tail, they were able to shut those down last week and hold off any more releases till that first surge came through. Now they'll be opening up and letting up some more runoff come off from those. But at this point, anything coming in on that tail will likely be much lower than what is coming through Wapaton right now. I kind of jumped ahead of myself a little bit, but one of the things we are seeing response on some of the other tributaries, and I'll go to the images of those in a bit. The last line in here talk about the pattern of daytime highs still in the upper 30s now with nighttime lows. Well, it was 32 degrees here this morning. The next couple of days it'll be there or a couple of degrees cooler. We'll get another shot of cool coming in over the next couple of days. A few snowflakes up in the north end of the valley, probably none showing up here. But then from Wednesday night, but certainly Thursday onward, we're going to be above freezing for the duration. Well, not the duration of the year. We might get below 1 or 2 more times, but it's going to be then wide open melt going into the end of the week and weekend with temperatures, and this is not an April Fool's joke, that we'll actually see temperatures rising into the 50s as we get into the weekend and that too. So we still will at that time be then seeing the major push on the rest of the river systems throughout here. So I'm just going to back off from this here and go to the images. So you can see that there's a lot of flow coming in. So there's just looking at Wapaton, and I'll just hover on there and you can see that it's just pretty much crested just below the major flood stage. A notation again to remind us that at Wapaton now there is also, right at this time, there's about 3,000 cubic feet per second that's bypassing that on the Breckenridge diversion that comes in north of town. So if this was a regular pre-Breckenridge diversion, you would see that up around 16 and a half, 17 feet at this point, but that's taken some off there. The wild rice at Abercrombie, that is, again, not drawing its full flow at this point. There's still a lot of snow that is just simply not in the system yet. So it's ramping up, but it's going to drop back down again. So it is not bringing in the full flow on there at this time. And as we get into coming up into Hickson, we're seeing part of that flow showing up. Let's see, there we go. Thank you for zooming out a little bit. We're seeing part of that flow coming in. I'm going to move this up a little bit further. There we go. And then coming in to Fargo again. That right now, there we go. Flatlining at 25, I just talked to our river forecaster down at Chanhassen a few minutes ago, and she's not quite ready to do the full deterministic out to see what the crest is going to be here. So the next day or so should be out. But again, that's simply because with the ice in the channels and with the effect of the temperatures and what's on the landscape. We did fly the our airborne, NOAA Airborne Ice and Snow Sensor Group flew this whole South Valley again from Friday into Saturday to look at what was still on the landscape from an aerial perspective. So again, that has been assessed and revamped on the model. So as far as how much water is still laying on the landscape, we think we have a pretty good idea of that, but they have to work that through and see when it's going to come out. Okay, so I think the other good words on here are just that it's warming up this weekend, and I'll go back here, and if you want to look at nice warm temperatures there for a second. So as we go into, there's nighttime lows tonight and tomorrow night still dropping down, generally below freezing. A lot of the soil temperatures around here are going to stay very near the freezing point now. So even though the nighttime air will drop down there, and we do have a skiff of snow or sprinkles that will come through here tomorrow. But then after that, and you'll see from Wednesday night is still showing cold, but in the far southern basin that could still stay near freezing or even slightly above in some places. And then Thursday, Friday, and I'll just zip down here so you can see that, oh, there is a 53 and a 61 on so that's not an April Fool's joke at all. The last thing in here, and I'll see if I can find this, is that, of course, for the last week or two, I've harangued you about the possibilities of this 50% at 37.9 and possibly even higher. And last Thursday we said, well, you know, it's probably going to be to the left side of that 50% line, okay? And probably well left of that 50% line, not only here in Fargo, but at some point here this early part of this week, we'll be looking at the rest of the Red River as well. So again, just the way that that water is metering out ever so slowly is taking the heat off of most of this. We're going to warm up this weekend and finally get everything moving. There are going to be some sprinkles coming in this weekend as well, but we're looking at 1/10 of an inch of moisture at that, maybe 1/4 of an inch in some places. It's not at that point enough to aggravate anything much more.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
He makes us happier today, doesn't he? Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary Sherling, if you'd like to make an opening statement, and then Bernie after that, please.
Good morning, thank you. Well, the county's been busy. Last week we had 3 public meetings that were well attended. This is certainly good news that we're hearing this morning, but that being said, we still have issues out in the county. We expect a lot of road closures, and we had over 200 people up at the Harwood Community Center last week because they know that regardless, they'll have some issues that they'll need to contend with. But this certainly helps out. And we continued with sandbagging operations that we're kind of winding down now because of this latest outlook. But we certainly appreciate the rural schools that helped us out in West Fargo. And then last Saturday, we had a bunch of our North Dakota legislators that were home for the weekend, and they came out to the County Highway Department and gave us a hand as well, so we really appreciated that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernie Dardis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to extend a thank you also to Commissioner Sherling and Cass County Engineer Jason, and Robert, all of you. West Fargo continues to monitor the Cheyenne River. The ice thickness is a bit of a concern for us because of the small river channel that we do have, the potential of ice jams, that type of thing. Ashtabula did release a quantity of water. We've had that come through the city last Wednesday and Thursday. We were monitoring that as to how the effect would have on the ice, as to how much heaving it was going to do or how much breakup it would be. But all in all, we're very comfortable. I'd like to send out a shout out to Dustin Scott, our city engineer, Pierre Freeman, our emergency services, and Chris Brungart, our public works director. All of these people have worked very diligently in making sure that we are prepared as well for any needs that we might have. Again, when you deal with the Cheyenne diversion or you deal with the Cheyenne River, it's going to be ice jams that's going to be our biggest concern. We have done tours from the from the Horace Inlet all the way north north of town, and we're comfortable with that other than the thickness of the ice. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I see Levi Bachmeyer's here from the governor's office. Do you want to say anything from the governor, Levi? Take that podium there, please. Yeah.
Yeah, we the governor took a trip out to Fairview, Montana just last Wednesday to survey some of the damage that had been done as the Yellowstone had experienced some ice jam flooding. We continue to monitor the situation across the state very closely. The highest area of observation and concern continues to be the Red River Basin, particularly as it comes through Fargo. The governor declared a statewide emergency for flooding last Wednesday, and so is able to mobilize the National Guard, utilize state assets, and will be eligible to apply for federal disaster declarations if certain thresholds, public infrastructure damages are met. And so we stand by and ready at the state level to support the flood fight as things continue to move forward. On the funding side for the diversion, we'll continue to work with the House appropriators as the water bill continues to move through that process. We imagine that it will likely come to a floor vote in the next 2 weeks or so, and continuing to advocate for the full funding that was included in the governor's executive budget recommendation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Bruce?
Yes, that brings us to the revised flood fighting strategy that I talked about just a moment ago. From the City of Fargo's perspective, I first want to express my sincere thank you to the early volunteers that showed up last week out at Sandbag Central. We were fortunate we had over 3,000 volunteers show up over that 4-day period and produce nearly 400,000 sandbags. And so I'm really proud to be a member of this community, a member of Cass County and this region. Particularly like to thank, in addition to individual volunteers, the middle schools that came out, the universities, obviously, and the business community. So I hate to say this, but we all had a lot of fun out there last week. And there were some long faces when we said we were going to close it down, but I think that's really a positive news. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, it truly is far easier to ramp down a flood fighting effort than ramp up. So based on the information that was just provided by the National Weather Service, that's exactly what we're going to do in Fargo. County has arguably a little bit different type of flood fight, and so I'll go to Jason in just a moment. But in Fargo now, we have sufficient sandbags and clay identified, so we will hit the pause button and stand at the ready if called upon. Terry will talk about Sandbag Central. We're going to leave it set up. If we have to throw the switch on that, we'll do that. But we're in a stand at the ready, wait and see point in the flood fight in Fargo. And with that, Jason, you can talk a little bit about the county. You have some interesting things there that we don't even have to deal with directly in Fargo. So.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. So, just like you, we're looking at some better flood levels out there, but we still have some concern, especially out on these tributary rivers. So we've scaled back our need for sandbags, but we're continuing to produce sandbags to get up to that. And as we look across the region, as Greg said in the forecast, we know that later this week we're going to see a significant bump in the temperatures. So the snowpack that's out there, especially through the kind of northeast part of the county all the way through the southwest, all that snow is going to get released pretty quick. And at the same time, there's a lot of ditches and culverts that are clogged with snow. And so I think people can expect there's going to be changing conditions, and that will change fairly rapidly, in some cases overnight. And I think the other piece to that too is in areas where maybe a road hasn't washed out before, you may end up having some upstream areas that a culvert is holding back a lot of water, and that water's pooling in a field behind it, and all of a sudden when that snow plug releases, you could get some more rapid drawdown, and all of a sudden a road a mile or two down that's, again, never washed out before, maybe gets washed out. So for our rural residents, just be aware and continue to monitor the places that maybe traditionally kind of go over on these rural roads, but also other spots. In the past, we've seen upwards of 150 to 200 road closures across our county road network, and probably twice that on our township road network. So for people just to keep their eyes open and stay safe.
Thank you. And that takes us to sandbag production, and I'll turn it over to Terry in just a moment. As you heard, we've suspended sandbag operations in Fargo. Cass County, they've got a 3-day push to try and reach their goal for sandbags. So Terry, maybe you could provide a summary of what happened. I kind of stole your thunder a little bit. I'm sorry about that. But but that you stand at the ready and you're set to go if called upon.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And I just kind of want to echo what yourself and the mayor also stated, that what a fantastic turnout from our community. We have the facility for Sandbag Central. Staff can set up all the equipment, but any kind of production out of Sandbag Central is 100% driven on volunteers. And so we were just, again, very, very proud to see our community step up. All the working with the middle schools was fantastic, and having the participation of the universities and the businesses, it really got us to our needs in our 4-day period. We operated Tuesday through Friday, and as you mentioned, had about 3,000 volunteers come through that helped us produce the 391,000 sandbags. They are now in storage in 2 different locations, about half of them out at the landfill area, and about half of them in the area of public works. All the equipment that was on site at Sandbag Central has been rented or leased for a 30-day period, so we will be at the ready in case we need to ramp back up. And I'm also glad to state that with those 3,000 volunteers and the hurried pace that you see out there, there were no reported injuries or accidents. In closing, I'd also just like to recognize a couple of our senior staff members that really assist in the total operations. They're normally with the Solid Waste Division year-round, and then they transition over into helping us with Sandbag Central. And with that, Paul Hansen is here. Paul's in charge of all operations. Jen Pickett is here. She's in charge of the procurement and all of the on-site logistics. And Dave Rowe is in charge of personnel. He's not here right now. He's busy trying to get our folks back onto their regular schedules. So thank you.
Look a lot more relaxed today.
Thank you, Terry. And Jason, one last follow-up. County continues to produce sandbags for 3 days this week, and you're at a point, you've got a goal. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we've reduced our overall goal down to 150,000, and as of yesterday, we were at about that 70,000 mark. And overall, we've had steady volunteer support, especially with our schools. We had great support from our rural Cass schools, Kindred, Northern Cass, and especially Central Cass came in with a large group. And then this week we've got West Fargo on Monday, Tuesday, and Central Cass back on Wednesday to get up. If we only get to that 120, 130,000 range, I know we've talked and we're going to continue to communicate if we have any other sandbag needs to request out of Fargo. So, but right now, shutting down our operations on Wednesday, but just like you, we're going to maintain our facilities and be at the ready. So if we need to increase that sandbag output, we can jumpstart everything again. But at this time, we're not looking for any volunteers. We're just going to run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday during those the times where the schools are already coordinated, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. And then I was on the phone with Ben Dow on Sunday talking about all this good news, and he said, "Hey, Bruce, I better remind you we still have a flood fight on our hands because the entire storm sewer system of the city is closed off at the river, and so we will be 100% reliant on pumping that system to keep it dry." And so that was a good reminder. That is absolutely true. We also have a sanitary sewer system that relies heavily on the storm sewer system being pumped down. And so, Ben, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. With the updated forecast, things are looking really good. But as we see our nice warm temperatures come in this weekend, we'll see a lot of runoff taking place. By this weekend, we'll be 100% dependent on pumping within the city of Fargo with our 73 lift stations. What that means is any rain that could come in could inundate that system, and we could see some pooling of water on our city streets, which in effect could affect our sanitary sewer system. So When we're closed off to the river, as we are right now, and moving in through the weekend, it always brings a concern to us of a fear of rain. With that comes the fear with our wastewater system taking on extra water if the streets do become inundated with some water out there. So Jim Haushauser from the wastewater plant can talk a little bit about our sanitary sewer system and our treatment process up at the plant if we have those issues.
Yep. Good morning. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, currently as we sit today, we are seeing some increased flows going through our sanitary sewer system. It's very manageable. It's something that we see all the time this time of the year, and we are quite used to it. In fact, our flood preparation is very similar to what we see in the summertime at the wastewater plant for heavy rain events and that type of deal. So our guys have been through the drill quite a bit. One reminder, today's the deadline for seasonal waivers for some pumps to be discharged outside rather than into the sanitary, so it'd be good to get that extra water out of the system as well. So.
Thank you, Jim. And one of the other things Ben reminded me of this weekend is the potential for portable flood wall deployment. And for the first time in history, the flood wall first NP, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the public may see something that they haven't seen before. And what can you tell us about that?
So we will be installing the flood panels beginning this morning at the Oak Grove area. We like to get it in advance. That will see water touching it at about that 35, 34 foot mark on river gauge. So we like to have it in. We don't like to wait for the last second. We want to make sure nothing goes wrong. We will move on to Elm Street at that point because the road closure is already in place because the water's up on there. So we'll go through the practice and put it in and make sure everything works good there. As we move down to the south down the river corridor, we'll move on to 2nd Street. That beautiful new flood wall out there, we'll be closing up the walkway pass and putting it in place. We will hold off on the 1st Avenue closure. However, at some point, once we've crested and things are settling down a little bit, we will go through. If we even don't have to put that 1st Avenue, we will do a road closure for a day and put that in place. That's a requirement as part of our Corps of Engineers to do that once every 5 years. So we'll have all the tools in place, and we'll go ahead and install it and document that and get that through. And then we'll move down to Main Avenue and do our Main Avenue closure on the walking path there. So the flood panels will go in place. 2nd Street is a very good thing for the city of Fargo. Generally in the past, when we saw the water 30 feet and rising, we would be putting clay out there because the water will touch that flood wall at 34, 35 feet.
Thank you, Ben. And I got so excited over the forecast, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. So before I go to volunteers and logistics, if I could back up to the flood fighting strategy a little bit. I left out Nathan Boerboom and Jason Benson, and they worked all weekend on slides, and I skipped right over them, and I apologize for that. But start out with Nathan in Fargo. Got a couple of public meetings scheduled this week, and then have kind of a revised strategy looking at clay emergency levies or the potential for. So Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely. We still will be holding the 2 public meetings I mentioned last week. First one will be here tonight at the Fargo Dome. Open house starting at 6:30, presentation at 7, and then our second one at the same time. So will be tomorrow down at Centennial Elementary School. In addition to being there at those
Is it possible to get, there you are, you're live again.
All right. So in addition to actually coming to the 2 facilities, you can also go onto Fargo's Facebook page, and we'll be doing that live as well, so you don't have to be there in person, or if you're unable to make it in person, you'll still be able to see those presentations. And then we'll still probably have our engineering staff go out into the field just to have conversations with property owners. Even if we don't deploy the sandbags, it's still a good action to make sure that we're touching base with all those property owners out there. And then, yeah, as Bruce mentioned, we did develop a 39-foot crest plan here recently. Hopefully we don't have to deploy this, but we have the sandbags available to do so, as well as all the locations identified, the trap bags necessary, and the clay sources identified. If we had to do that, we'd still be looking at, just shy of 10 miles worth of emergency measures. but hopefully we don't have to go to those levels.
Thank you. And Jason, the county, again, can tend to be a little bit of a different flood fight in the county, dealing with so much rural area.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, right now it's up on some of the tributaries. You know, there's a little unknown as far as the timing of when these are going to be coming to full flooding and cresting. And a lot of times how they time together makes a big difference in how much overland flooding happens. So, you know, we'll keep our fingers crossed there. The other wild card is, you know, what that overall elevation on the red gets, especially north of Fargo and West Fargo, as the Cheyenne River starts to kind of get backed up and can't flow into the red once it gets above 33 and especially above 35, which causes some overland flooding on the Maple, Rush, and Cheyenne in that Harwood area. So we'll continue to monitor that really closely. One thing with this picture, I want to point out this new resource that we've got with our Sheriff's Department and the UAS, Red River Valley UAS team that he's got members on. So when we do have roads get overtopped, we can get an aerial picture of, or view of what exactly is happening to that water and how extensive some of these road washouts might be. All right. Then when it comes to our sandbag deployment, we're going to start getting sandbags out to people both south of town in the Stanley Township area, as well as north of town for Reed Township, Harwood Township, and those rural subdivisions along the Cheyenne, Maple, and Rush rivers. And then we also have the ability to get out and get some survey crews on site to give homeowners some survey elevations as to what they should be looking at for you know, how to protect based on the Harwood gauge on the Cheyenne River or the Fargo gauge on the red. We remind people that we're not going to tell you what to protect to. That's a personal decision and personal risk, but we're going to provide all the information we can to make sure they can make a good educated decision on how many sandbags to put down. People can still come in and purchase bundles of sandbags for 1,000 bags for $100, and then we'll deliver a load of sand, and then we'll be, like I said, we'll be pushing out filled sandbags to these rural communities and subdivisions and a handful of individual rural residents as well. Goal of 1,000 sandbags to them, and it's based on conditions. So if they're down a narrow driveway or kind of smaller road that doesn't have a turnaround point for a semi, we're not going to be able to get in and get them maybe get them the filled sandbags, but we'll try our best to get them bags and/or sand in a bundle. All right, and then finally, just like Nathan mentioned, you know, some revised levees. Right now, we've got a number of our other levee areas are protected in and around the 41 feet. So we're looking at two key areas on the east side of University Drive down around 76th Avenue, and we expect to be putting those in either later this week or early next week.
Thank you, Jason. And that kind of gets us back on track at number 7 on our agenda, which is volunteers and logistics. We are in a standby mode at this point in time, but Nicole Crutchfield, who our logistics team coordinator, did a terrific job at Sandbag Central last week. Even in a wait-and-see mode, we're ready for the next phase if called upon.
Yep, just wanted to thank First Link, Salvation Army, and Red Cross for all their work last week. We couldn't do it without them. And thanks to us basically being able to repeat from past years a lot of those operations. So that was the good news, that we know how to do it still. And, yeah, so moving into the next phase, we're just in a standby mode.
Thank you. And Robert, similar in the county, differences?
Bruce, thank you. Yeah, very similar standpoint from the county. First of all, just a big thank you to the schools, because we really would not have had the production we had last week if it weren't for the schools. So a heartfelt thank you for all of the districts and organizations that helped us and sent groups out there. It was, I would say a steady production, and really due to the groups that we had. Again, we're not soliciting more volunteers at this time moving forward. We've got groups coming in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We definitely need those groups to come as planned, but beyond that, we will be in somewhat of a standby mode, obviously communicating with the city very closely. And a thank you to again, as Commissioner Sherling mentioned, the legislators who were here on Saturday and really showed up to work, and the Red Cross folks who were helping us out and supporting us the whole time, and it was really impressive to see. I may be the only guy in the room who hasn't been through a flood fight before, and this was quite an impressive community-wide operation to see, and my hat's off to the community, to the county and city employees who turned their schedules on end to support this, and we appreciate the help moving forward, and we will be communicating as our needs may change if they do.
Thank you, Robert, and with that, that's a brief update from the city and the county where we are today. I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Well, we just want to thank our partner agencies. Missy Idness, I'd let you speak first, but thank you for his kids that came out. They were fantastic, and I hope they learned a community lesson.
Definitely. The students were so eager to be a part of this, and I think we will relay the message of appreciation back to our students and staff, but we were happy we were able to send 300 to 400 students AM and PM, and then about 20 staff members, but they are going to be a little disappointed.
Yeah, they're least West Fargo schools.
So our students are even more disappointed than the Fargo students because they did such a good job. Ours don't even get to go this week, other than out to the county. So we have about 150 that will go today and tomorrow out to the county, but we have about 300 more with signed waivers ready to go. So if you need to ramp back up, they're ready.
Great, great. Dean Brashani, we saw a lot of the NDSU students out there helping us out, and when your offensive linemen step into the big shoot area, they're big guys, so they were very good workers.
They joined the frustration and worsened yet. Now they have to turn back to finals.
We thank them for coming out. Mark Nesbitt, you're speaking for the chamber?
Yeah, we're just very proud of the community leaders and the public employees who so effectively and efficiently stepped up. Very little impact on any community businesses, so thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Joel Vettel, what do you got to tell us today about the parks?
Well, I find out all sorts of new things when I come here. I now know we have 2 Fargo fire chiefs. That's awesome. Well, fire protected. No, from the Fargo Park District, we are still in the mode of, we've created about 10,000 sandbags to anticipate we're going to take and protect some of our more vulnerable areas. We look up at the Edgewood area, and then along with that, Jack Williams Stadium, which is always very vulnerable. We anticipate that 10,000 will be enough for our needs, but we'll move on to making sure we're ready for any potential cleanup that has to take place as soon as these floodwaters recede. I know everybody wants to get into the area of spring and summer, and so we're excited for that. But we want to again thank all of our employees for the wonderful work they've done. Dave Beets and his team have done a great job preparing our park district system for any potential floods that are taking place.
Thank you. And from the Guard, we have Colonel Darrell Anderson.
Good morning, everybody. This event gave us an opportunity to polish up some processes that we haven't exercised in a while, and in particular, in the last 8 to 10 years, we have probably hundreds of new airmen who have never experienced this before. So this is a great opportunity to teach them about their state mission and their contributions to domestic operations. So we will continue that. We're going into a guard drill weekend, and this is all great news, and we're going to take advantage of everything as a great learning experience for our newest members. That is all, Mr. Mayor.
Well, as an exercise, it's good for all of us to revamp our plans, and I think this has been good for us. We prepared for a heavyweight flight, but it's going to be a light heavyweight fight, basically. And Chief Dirksen, the fire chief, you had some comments to make about safety. I do want to compliment the fire department. You had a lot of new guys on the line that had never done a flood fight before, so it's fun to see that happen, and they learned a lot about our community. But you had a little concerns of what's happened in the nation and what we need to be aware of.
Yeah, just as a general reminder, and thanks, Mayor. You know, with as the floodwaters rise, curiosity gets out there. The weather's going to start turning nicer. People are going to be more active and doing things. So, just to have that high level of suspicion of what might be going on out there. Be careful if you're going out by the river or anything like that to go look. I know a lot of people want to go out and drive around. Please don't drive through any water. As if we have issues with a rain event in town, Ben has already identified that there's going to be some spots in the streets that are going to pool up with water. Just don't go through those things. Be safe. We've seen some, incidents around the country with the flooding that's happened over the last couple of weeks, where rescues have had to been made, where lives have been lost, and we definitely wouldn't want to see that around here. So be careful. Some of the retention ponds will start to fill up as well, and there might be some curiosity around those. So just make sure you're watching out and being safe during the next couple of weeks while this event unfolds and as we ramp down. Thanks.
Thank you. Word of the day is cautious optimism. We're very encouraged by the weather reports and what's been going on, so I think many of us are very pleased what's happened in the last week. We'll continue to go forward to be prepared for whatever comes at us. Bruce, what about a meeting next time?
Well, a week ago, we were pretty certain about scheduling this meeting. We would like to stay with a to be determined. We'd like to see that first deterministic forecast come out, as Greg mentioned, could be as early as Wednesday, and then based on what we see there, determine the need for future meetings. So just stay tuned. Thank you, everybody, sincerely for attending today. This is a good news day. It's not a bad news day. And so maybe you could ask Commissioner Strand if he has any thoughts, observations.
John, you're usually not shy, so do you have a closing comment as well?
Thank you, and thanks everybody out there. We should have a big block of wood to knock on, because we've gotten a pass today and this season, but and it goes without saying the community rises to the occasion when our floodwaters are coming at us. But I'd like to comment too that there's folks out there who think that there's disappointment that we're not getting the flood that we expected, and I can't imagine anybody saying that there was hope that this would be politically expedient to have a flood come our way to accelerate the diversion discussion. And I don't want to throw a bucket of cold water on our efforts here, but you look at this room, it couldn't be further from the truth that people were hoping for a flood, and that there was some expediency to it, and that there was some value to getting a flood. It just needs to be said that we are prepared, and we all know if we weren't prepared, then we'd really have some serious issues in our community for why wasn't our city ready and our county ready? Why weren't our leaders there and in advance expecting this? So hats off to all of you, and to all of your folks, and to all your volunteers, and to the community we live in for what they do and deliver, and the heart they have for each other. So it's just a great fight, and I hope the next few weeks cooperate.
Mary Shirley, any closeout? In fact, you're going to some meeting on the diversion today, right, to hear a court opinion? So
We are, and we're hopeful that we can quit going through this little exercise every once in a while. This is a tremendous amount of time and effort and cost to our entire community and county every time we have to do this. We are the largest metropolitan area in the state. Our social services department is nearly 30% of the population of the needs for social services in the state. And while we're going through a flood, our social services director is in charge of volunteers. That's not what he should be doing. And we are all diverted from the important work that we have to do. I look forward to the day when we can sit back, hopefully in 6.5 years, and watch the river run through it and not have to go through this again. So yes, we are going to Minneapolis today, and hopefully we'll have a good result from that hearing, and we'll, hopefully we'll get a good result from our North Dakota legislators in supporting us financially as we wind up with the legislative session this year. And we'll move forward, and we'll have protection like the rest of the Red River Valley does. I know I'm on a board with Red River Basin Commission, and talking to my friends in Canada, they certainly intend to operate their diversion again this year, and it's a marvelous thing, and they've saved billions of dollars with having that project up there. They've expanded it once and operated it many times, and it's been a lifesaver for them. So I'm excited to get going. Hopefully it'll be this year.
Mayor Bernie Dardis.
The cooperation and communication and the engagement from the entire community, both sides of the river, including all cities, has been amazing. From the Chamber of Commerce to the school districts, it makes one very, very proud to be a resident of this community. I think that there's one thing that has been neglected this morning, and that is thanking some very key people sitting beside me. Mayor Mahoney and Bruce Grubb, Mary Sherling, Robert Wilson, Jason Benson, Nathan, and Brenda, and Nicole. There's been a lot of thank yous going out to all of you wonderful people that are here. But Mayor Mahoney, I'd like to thank you and Bruce for your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernie. Well, that's it. Any closing comments, Bruce? Or
No, stay tuned, stay positive.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.